What's the best way to promote well-being in the workplace? This is the IssuesWatch podcast. Hi, I'm Don Meyer, Chief Marketing Officer at the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and welcome to the IssuesWatch podcast. Understanding issues related to mental health in the workplace can be challenging. It's essential for employees, HR staff, and business leaders to have the resources to support mental health. But most of us know very little about workforce burnout, how to process stress, and the importance of self-care, and how we can foster a safe business environment surrounding mental health. Here with me to provide their insights are Donovan, a licensed counselor at Peace of Mind Counseling, and Sarah Krom, managing partner at SKC & Company CPAs and a past president of the NJCPA. Welcome, Ifen and Sarah.
Thanks, Don. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to be here. My honor.
Great. Oh, thank you very much. I don't think we've ever had someone say that before, so I appreciate that. So because of that, we're going to start with you, Ifen. The concern for mental health and well-being in the workplace is a relatively new phenomenon. Do you attribute this to the pandemic, the workforce becoming younger, or other factors?
So stress and burnout at workplaces has always been there. It's a multifaceted reasons why. If you blame it on pandemics, yeah, there's some reason to it. Way back then, when we couldn't, when we have stress and situation from home, we go to work, we cope with work. And then if we don't like work, we vice versa, we go home. But during the pandemics, we combine the work and home situation together, plus added isolation. And isolation brings shame. Isolation is hard on people. And so when we've been isolated, we feel like we're being punished. Isolation gives us the feeling of stuckness. And when you're stuck, that makes you feel like you can't get out, you can't do anything about it. It makes it really hard on your mental health. Hence, solitary confinement is a punishment for the inmates. Hence, timeout is sort of like a punishment for children, right? So we don't like that. Yeah. And so, yeah, burnout. And then if you think about, is it really the younger generation workforce? Well, there's some truth in that. But the truth is the younger people, they use a lot of technology, right? And so the technology, in reality, the World Wide Web, bring us closer together, and we're absorbing so much information in such a short period of time. Everything is changing in such a fast paced, and the young people utilize technology. And so there are good things with the World Wide Web, with the internet, and there are bad things. Younger people, the generation now, we share so much. We're in a hyper sharing world right now. We share from the food we eat to our personal life situations, clothes we wear, we share everything. And sometimes we share our personal lives, which is horrifying for mental health specialists to see that. But all that sharing, there are good and bad come out of that. So in the financial world, we're talking about accounting firms right now. They're realizing that, long hours, it causes burnout. They are realizing that if they do not focus on their employees and shine a spotlight on them, then it causes burnout. And so the human resource area, they're trying to figure out that how can we turn our human resource from a cost standpoint to an asset point.
So Sarah, as a managing partner, you have to look at not only your own mental health and your own mental well-being, but you have to look at it in terms of your employees. So has your approach changed as a leader to ensure that your staff feel supported? And does it require not only awareness, which I think we're doing right now, but also changes in policy?
So it's a great question, Don. And I love that you talked about the leader needing to be concerned with his or her own mental health first and foremost, because that is huge. And
Right.
and we can do a whole separate podcast just on self-awareness and your mental health before you can help others. But to answer your question, yes. I mean, my philosophy on this within a firm or a business organization has changed. And that's mostly because I've changed my thoughts on mental health. So as leaders, I feel that we have a responsibility to make sure that our team is okay. And our team, our people in a public accounting firm are our greatest assets. If we were building widgets, we would make sure that the machines were having the oil changed regularly and we're under regular maintenance schedules. We need to translate that into people, right? And we need to make sure that our team and our people are on regular maintenance schedules to maintain their well-being, right? And that's going to look different for different people on our team, right? And so what works for me to unplug and recharge or to feel heard is going to be different than what it feels like or is needed by another team member in my organization. And so I think that the importance of being a leader is to understand really what it looks like in your organization and at the individual level. And so we can make sure that it's built into our culture. We can talk about it. We can build awareness like we are now. But ultimately, how we show up for our team members is really what matters. And it's got to start with empathy. And it's got to start with understanding that everyone is different and that everyone's needs are different. So, I mean, from a policy standpoint, I would hope that there are already policies that exist, albeit possibly not very public to the team. You know, there's policies around leaves that people have, I'm sure, or, you know, EAPs, the employee assistance programs that most healthcare providers offer through, you know, the employee benefit packages. We just have to talk more about it within our organization and make sure that people know that it's a safe space to come into a room with your leader or the HR department and have a conversation, and you'll be able to feel supported. And really, I mean, people don't shy away from this word in the work environment, but really loved, because ultimately that's really what it comes down to, is feeling supported and loved and heard. And a lot of times that's just what people need.
Right. No, I think it's a good point. I did want to circle back to, you know, how we started that question about like kind of just understanding your own mental well-being. You know, I know personally, like I know kind of what triggers me down sort of that spiral. If I spend too much time on social media, I'm a news junkie. I was a journalism major, so I've always loved the news, but I know that the news depresses me. So for my own mental well-being, like I've tried to reduce my social media contact. I try not to look at the news constantly. I've turned off some alerts on my phone, so I'm not getting them constantly. Because let's face it, the news we're fed is usually bad. So are there things that you do as not just as a leader, but as a person, to maybe like things you notice like kind of set you down a bad path and you try and avoid them now?
So it's an interesting question. I would say yes, and the news is definitely one of them. So I only listen to, you know, my self-selected flash briefing in the morning, and that's it.
Smart.
And it's about maybe 2 minutes of news, and it's from, you know, different providers that I've selected, and that's it. And that's how I choose to isolate myself from it. But it's also being in tune enough to myself to know, okay, I'm going to go down a path that isn't going to be good for anybody, and making that adjustment and removing myself from the situation. So I can give you a great example. The last week of tax season, I was feeling, as one might imagine, a lot of stress closer to the deadline, and I could feel myself inside getting angry and just frustrated. And that's not normally who I am as a person. So right. I recognized that, and I said, if I show up to the office like this today, it's not going to be good. People are going to pick up on my energy. People are going to pick up on that vibe, and it's, you know, going to impact morale or impact one person, you know, more than another. And I can't do that. Right. And so being aware of how you show up for your team is, I think, a huge thing to be in tuned with, so that you can make adjustments and course corrections and not have that, you know, for me, I'll call it that negative energy permeate throughout the organization on any given day.
Right. And it's got to be a tough balance too, because you have to allow yourself to be angry if you're angry. But I understand your point of you don't want to take that into the office because then there's this whole domino effect. So yeah, that's a good point, and thanks for sharing that example. So Ifen, let's return back to the workforce. Workforce burnout is on the rise. And there's actually kind of a definition of burnout. What causes job burnout, and how can someone, an individual or a managing partner like Sarah, how can they recognize that someone might be at risk?
Well, I like what Sarah said earlier. Self-awareness is 50% of healing. You need to know how you're triggered. Like you said earlier, how you are triggered. You need to know what is your reaction button. How do you react to trauma or to a situation that you don't like? And what do you need at the time? Being self-aware helps a lot with burnout. But in a clinical sense, what is burnout? So we need to explain what really is burnout. Anxiety, stress, and burnout, we kind of link those three things together. But in reality, anxiety is coming from inside, it's internally. How do you feel? How do you view the situation? And what's the story you're telling yourself? All right. And then stress is external, whatever you add to your life, family situation, divorces, or illness in a family or newborn baby, right? We all been there. So when you added the external stress plus the internal anxiety, and when you are feeling this two intensity of emotion together, and then you feel stuck and you couldn't get out of it, that is burnout. So in reality, you have the fight, flight, and freeze. And freeze is the worst part of the trauma. We call it burnout. So when you're stuck in the fight and flight and feel like you couldn't get out, and then it leads to burnout. And when you feel stuck and you couldn't get out, you feel trapped. And the reaction to burnout is mostly like dissociation, numbness, and helpless behavior. So when a person is stuck in this mode, in a freeze mode, you display all these you have that inability to get out the bed. Have you ever felt that way? How do you recognize that you're at risk? Well, you need to think, how did you grow up and the trauma you've been through? You need to resolve your own traumas. In other words, you got to fill it into yourself. Make sure that yourself is filled. Make sure yourself is taken care of. We need to practice self-kindness. As Sarah said earlier.
Right. No, good point. So Sarah, you mentioned a few minutes ago, feeling stressed out about the end of tax season. If you're feeling it, I'm sure your staff is feeling it as well. So what can firms and companies do to recognize and overcome potential job burnout, whether it's in an obvious stressful situation like the last week before the tax deadline, or even just throughout the year?
Yeah, I love our profession. I really, really do. But, the answer to this question goes a lot deeper than, in-office massage therapists and bringing in food and flexible work hours. Those are all great things. I'm not diminishing them. We do them at our firm. But, in our profession, we need to begin with a little bit different look at long-term planning. And we need to think about restructuring our clients, our workload, and the expectations that we set for our clients and for ourselves and our team. And, what we've always done as a profession, that badge of honor of endless nights and endless hours, doesn't work anymore. And that's, to me, that's the fact. We don't need to talk about why it doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't. So if you haven't started the process as an organization yet to restructure how you do things and, essentially discontinue the busy season, if you will, I suggest starting with a team debrief, right? I mean, you've got people on the front lines who have experienced this year after year. And, since COVID, it feels sometimes like it's been the never ending tax season. So they have a lot of the answers, right? Ask for their feedback on what needs to be fixed in the organization, specifically around this issue, and ask them their ideas on how to do it. Because if you ask, they will start sharing and they will come up with really amazing things, and some things are going to take longer to implement than others. But, if you just listen and start moving the needle a little bit each year, you'll get to where you want to go, and your team's going to see that incremental change year over year and be really overjoyed about it, which is essentially what you want to have happen.
Yeah, it's good to see. I've been with the organization a long time, and I can still recall that idea of working long hours. Um, it was a badge of honor. It was something that people were complaining about, but at the same time, they're almost bragging about the number of hours that they had to put in. But it's good to see that, as you were pointing out, that transition of now people are going, no, this is not acceptable. There's got to be a better way. And for everybody's mental health, there's got to be a better way to find it. So I agree with that. I'm starting to see that more and more from public accounting firms. And the leadership is really taking upon themselves to make these changes. So that seems like a very positive change. Um, One of the things that struck me the last couple of years is the workplace isn't typically thought of as a place to talk about mental health. In fact, data shows that workers are far more willing to talk about mental health with friends and family over managers and executives, which makes all the sense in the world. Ifen, if leaders are looking to create a workforce that's less burnt out, more productive, less willing to consider quitting, what can employers do to combat the stigma behind talking about mental health in the workforce?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I heard Sarah says earlier that you really listen to your listen to employees and what their needs. So in other words, shine a spotlight on your employees, help to create a healthy, safe working environment. When I say safe, I don't mean the fire code safe. I mean really a place where employees feel comfortable and secure at ease at both for their physical and emotional safety. And when you do that, then this is the best place to work for, and really listen to them. There are resources in a community you can help your employees and tap into those resources. There are also mental health counselors are willing to go to your workplaces to talk about burnout and psychoeducate your employees on burnout and help them out. And what we're doing here in the podcast is great. We can psychoeducate people on burnout and how to take care of themselves and what self-cares look like in your life and how balancing work life and home life can, how to balance your work and home life together.
And Sarah, same question. And we've already talked a little bit about this, but what can employers do to combat the stigma behind talking about mental health in the workforce?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with talking about it and trying to normalize it as much as possible, right? And as the leader, taking the leap yourself of being vulnerable and sharing some of your own situations or concerns or issues that you're having with your team in an appropriate setting, so that it more normalizes that dialogue. As Ifen said, the education behind it and sharing podcasts such as this one and many others that are out there to sort of get that message across to the team that, we can talk about this. This is okay. This is happening. This is acceptable to discuss in the workplace. This is acceptable to ask for help in the workplace. I said earlier, practice empathy, right? I mean, as a leader, I strongly feel that it's our responsibility to get the best out of our people. And that doesn't mean the most billable hours. That means the best version of themselves as humans. And as a plea to other leaders out there, please don't just kick this topic to your HR department, because we need to set the tone at the top, and it needs to be something that we embrace and aren't afraid to talk about and to be involved with. And I think, finally, sort of making decisions and strategy decisions under the umbrella of, people over profits. And I love the way Ifen says, shine a light on your people. Maybe we should say people over production in the CPA firm world, but just make decisions that put your people first and think about not only who they are when they show up in your office or if they're virtual on the team Zooms, but who they are as people outside of the organization. And we all have lives, we all have issues, we all have things that impact our work selves. Just own that and accept that with the team and be honest about it.
Right. And I think it's one thing to talk the talk. I'm sure there's a lot of leaders doing that, but they also have to walk the walk. And I think, we learned about Ifen and what you're doing regarding mental health through broadcasts that you had done through the firm. You're appearing on this podcast. You're using words like love and empathy. So I would think you're sending a clear message to your staff that you are open to these conversations about mental health. So I think that's what other leaders need to do as well. Not necessarily appear on a podcast, but I think, take action, not just the words, but actually take action like you're doing. So, all the credit in the world for that. And I guess that's why you are our youngest president ever. This is such an important topic. We should keep talking about it, but we'll stop here for now. Ifen and Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, Don. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening and watching. For additional mental health resources, access the show notes.